What if pain isn't the problem, but actually the pathway back to you? You're listening to The Leadership Wound, From Pain to Permission. I'm Amanda Rohr, your host and founder of Authentically You, coaching for embodied spiritual living and leading. This is where we get honest about the real cost of leadership, the burnout, the pretending, the rejection, and the return to your authentic self. Because this isn't about performance, it's about permission. Welcome to the leader you've always been. Reframing is not denial about what's going on. It's not pretending things are fine, and it's not spiritual bypassing. It's not slapping a verse on top of it or a thought on top of anxiety and calling it faith. Reframing is something much more honest. Reframing is the practice. It's a practice of examining the meaning that you have been assigning to the feeling of uncertainty and choosing a truer interpretation rather than the one that your brain keeps giving you. Welcome to The Leadership Wound, the podcast where we tell the truth about the unseen costs of leadership and the path from pain to permission. If you're new here, I'm Amanda Rohr, coach, teacher, and the founder of Authentically You, coaching for embodied spiritual living and leading. This space is created for leaders, entrepreneurs, and everyday people who are tired of performing, tired of carrying it all, and ready to start leading from a place that's grounded, honest, and true. Because leadership doesn't just shape what we do. It shapes who we are becoming. And in this series that we're in, we're talking about something I genuinely believe may be one of the most important things that you learn in 2026. And that is the capacity to hold space for uncertainty. If you're just joining us, this is a 4-part series. Episode 1 was the foundation. Uncertainty isn't always failure. It's often formation. And episode 2 was the first component, which is regulation. Learning to return to safety in the body through the rhythm of pause, return, and embody. Because we're holistic beings, and you can't lead well if your nervous system is constantly being hijacked. And today we're moving into the second component, which is reframing. Because once you're regulated enough to be present, the next question becomes, what story am I telling myself about the season that I find myself in right now? And is that story helping me to move forward, or is it keeping me stuck and paralyzed and exhausted? So what is reframing? Reframing is not denial about what's going on. It's not pretending things are fine, and it's not spiritual bypassing. It's not slapping a verse on top of it or a thought on top of anxiety and calling it faith. Reframing is something much more honest. Reframing is the practice. It's a practice of examining the meaning that you have been assigning to the feeling of uncertainty and choosing a truer interpretation rather than the one that your brain keeps giving you. Because uncertainty can be feeling like a blank space, and your mind hates blank spaces. Your mind will fill that blank. And if you don't choose the meaning for yourself, your fear will choose it for you. And this is where leaders get stuck often. Not because they don't have strategy or because they don't have talent, not because they don't have a calling on their life, but because the story that they continue to tell themselves in the middle is quietly draining their strength. Let me make this personal for a moment, because I'm not just teaching this from a distance. I'm actually being a practitioner. God is calling me to be a practitioner in this season of uncertainty. And one of the thoughts that I've had to confront in this season, one I didn't even realize was running under the surface, was this: if I can't see something happening, it means nothing is happening at all. Thought, it sounds logical, it sounds efficient, it sounds like productivity, but spiritually, it's actually a form of mistrust because it assumes that if I can't track it or measure it or see it with my own eyes, then God must not be moving at all. But the truth is, so many of us have been trained in that way of thinking. We've been trained to believe that we have to see it before we can believe it. But the life of faith that God calls us to says something different. It says God does some of his most important work in the unseen, under the surface, in the hidden places, in roots, in preparation, and yes, in his timing. If you're in a season of uncertainty right now, I want you to hear this. Just because you cannot see movement with your eyes doesn't mean God isn't moving. Sometimes what you can't see is exactly where he's working the most. And when it all comes together, you can look back and say, oh my goodness, this is what he was doing. There's science behind these thoughts that shape your capacity. Let's talk about this for a moment. It's about the why. Let's talk about the why, because it's not just spiritual. It's neurological. Your brain is designed to keep you safe. It is constantly scanning for threats, predicting outcomes, and trying to reduce uncertainty. This is your primitive brain. And here's the crucial part. Your brain doesn't respond to reality as it is. It responds to the reality as you are interpreting it. That's not motivational. That's biological. Your interpretation of what's going on creates meaning, and meaning creates emotion. And emotion fuels our behavior and our actions. So, is your interpretation of uncertainty, this is danger? Because if it is, your body will respond with stress and urgency. Or maybe is your interpretation of uncertainty, this is failure? Because if it is, your body will respond with collapse or shame. Maybe your interpretation is, this is God being silent. This uncertainty means that God's being silent and he's not moving. If that's the case, you can't start. If that's the story your brain is telling you, you can start to feel alone, as if God is far away. But if you interpret uncertainty as, this is formation, this is the unseen work, there is something happening, this is preparation, then your body responds altogether differently. Not because life is easy, but because nervous system stops bracing for catastrophe and your capacity begins to increase. This is why reframing is so important. It's just not fluff. It's actually leadership critical work. Because leaders don't just lead with strategy. They lead with the reality of what is actually happening rather than the stories that your brain has been telling you. Here's a simple way to think about it. When uncertainty hits, your brain can default into what researchers often describe as the threat mode, a survival state where you begin to prioritize safety, speed, and yes, certainty. And in threat mode, you narrow your perspective. Your focus is on worst-case outcomes. You make quick decisions just to relieve the discomfort. And you lose creativity and discernment. You become reactive instead of responsive. But when you begin to reframe, you're not ignoring the reality of what is happening. You're actually shifting from threat mode to what we call meaning mode, where you can hold nuance, you can still stay connected, and you can choose your response appropriately. And when you do that, your decision-making improves, your emotional resilience increases, and your relationships stay steady because you're not in a fight or flight kind of movement. And your leadership becomes less performative to what other people need or what you think you need, and more grounded to what the reality is calling for. Here's what I want you to consider. For many leaders, uncertainty doesn't just bring up the logistics or the practical things. It actually brings up and questions your identity. It touches the places in you that say, if I don't know what I'm doing, I'm not safe. If I can't predict it, I can't trust it. If I can't control it, I will be rejected. And if I'm not successful, that means I'm not worthy. This is where uncertainty can feel like a threat to the self. And the leadership wound shows up right at the intersection of our identity and what is going on, in the pressure to perform and regain certainty. But hear me, you don't need certainty to lead well. What you need is honesty and inner steadiness. And that steadiness is built through inner work. There's just no way around it. We have to do our inner work. The three most common meanings that leaders assign to uncertainty when the future is unclear is this. This means I'm failing, because if it was from God, it would be easy. If I was doing it right, I'd have clarity. Number two, this means I'm unsafe. Uncertainty means I'm unsafe. If I don't have a guarantee, I cannot move. If I risk and it doesn't work, it will cost me too much. And the third thing is, this means I'm alone. I have to figure this all out on my own because God is being silent. And when you believe these three stories, you will lead like someone who is failing, who is unsafe, and who is alone. And when you feel like you're failing and you're unsafe and you are alone, you will rush into things. You will overcompensate. You will try to control everything. You will overwork and sometimes even freeze. But uncertainty can mean something else. And this is where the inner work begins. Let's bring this back to the series thread. You are being formed into the person who can carry the vision that God is giving you. And that formation often happens in the unseen. Over the last several months, God has been bringing things together for a vision that He gave me back in the new year. And I'm not going to explain everything that has to do with that right now. That's going to be in a future episode. But what I want to say today is this. There has been a process that God has had me on. There has been waiting. There has been stretching. There has been surrender. And all of this, well, most of it has been unseen work. And the temptation in the process, in the journey that I was on, was to assume that nothing is happening because I couldn't see the pieces that were being put together. But what God has been teaching me in this realm of uncertainty is the unseen doesn't mean He's inactive. Hidden doesn't mean He's absent. And the delayed timing, or what I thought was delayed timing, doesn't mean that He's denied the vision. Sometimes the season that feels like nothing is happening is actually the season where everything is being built. It's just all under the surface. The roots, the capacity to hold it all, the character, the endurance, the clarity, and the internal steadiness that will be required to actually carry out the vision. Because when the vision finally shows up in its tangible form, it will require more than excitement. It will require more than motivation. It will require the capacity to hold uncertainty. And it will require a leader who can hold that type of capacity. But here's why leaders get it all backwards. Here's the trap that leaders like myself, and I think like others, fall into. They become obsessed with having to have strategy or the structure or getting people on board or having the perfect plan, building the platform, or executing the launch. And I'm not saying that these things don't matter, but if you build the strategy before you build the leader who can carry it out, the vision will actually crush you, because the vision doesn't just require resources. It requires a person with capacity. Capacity for the weight, capacity for all the decisions that need to be made, capacity for everybody's opinions that will come your way, capacity for conflict, which will inevitably come, and capacity for the unknown, and capacity for the success that will surely happen. And if the inner world of your life isn't prepared, the outer world will take you out. It will take you over. So reframing is the moment that you ask, what if the season I'm in isn't blocking the vision, but actually building me for it? I teach in my coaching practice this reframing rhythm, which is pause, return, and embody. You already learned a little bit about that rhythm in episode 2, so I won't go into it in detail. But pause, return, and embody. It's reframing for the inside. It's the inner work of what God wants to do. Because you can't reframe when you are dysregulated. You have to first return to your true self. So here's the lived sequence. It's pause. That's the beginning. We stop, we identify the story that our brain is telling ourselves. And we say to ourselves, is this true? Or is this part of our false self? That's part of the next part, returning. We return. We regulate enough to come back to the safety and presence of where we are right now in the moment with God and with our true self. And then we begin to reframe. We choose the truer interpretation that aligns with our faith and the reality of who God is and who He says we are. And lastly, we embody that truth. We embody that return by taking the next faithful step. And here are the questions that make reframing a practical rhythm in your life. When you catch yourself spiraling, like we all do, you ask, what am I making this mean? What's the story my brain is telling me today? Not what is happening, but what am I making what is happening mean? The next one is that meaning true? Or is it just a familiar thought loop that keeps going over and over like a recording in my brain? Some meanings are just inherited from our past wounds, the pressures that we have ourselves under or others put us on, or the performance mode. The third question is, what would a truer interpretation sound like that honors us as holistic beings and honors the people that we lead? Fourthly, what emotion will that thought create? Because your emotions will determine your behavior. And lastly, what is the next faithful step from that emotion? Not from panic, not from proving, but from peace. What is the next faithful step I can take if I want to be in a state of peace? Here's some examples. One circumstance might say, I don't know the next step, and I have so much anxiety around it. The fear story that your brain is telling you is, this means I'm failing. If I don't know the next step, it means I'm failing. So the story your brain is telling you because you don't know the next step, because you're uncertain of the next step, is I must be failing. So in order to reframe that, we can pause and say, this is a moment to seek God and take the next faithful step, rather than spiraling into, I'm failing because I don't know the next step. What if it's okay not to know the next step? And it's okay to go seek God's guidance. Another circumstance might be, this is taking longer than I expected. I am further behind than I wanted to be. I thought I would be further ahead. The fear story is, this means it's not going to happen. If it hasn't happened yet, it's not going to happen. So in order to reframe it, we can say, timing is part of formation. God is working under the surface even when I cannot see it. Or maybe this is your circumstance. I can't see the progress. So my fear story is, nothing's happening. If I can't see it, it means nothing is happening. In order to reframe it, we can say, unseen doesn't mean inactive. Unseen doesn't mean inactive. Or lastly, maybe you're feeling exposed, like everyone is looking at you and seeing all of your weaknesses, seeing all of your misgivings, seeing all of your failings. I feel exposed. The fear story is saying, I'm going to be rejected. If they see the real me, I will be rejected. In order to reframe the story of what is actually happening, we can say visibility, becoming visible, allowing others to see me as my true self is actually stretching me, and I can lead with integrity in that stretch. Those are just a couple examples. Perhaps you have your own fear story and you can reframe what is actually going on. Now, I want to speak directly to something that matters, especially for leaders and entrepreneurs. And that is, you cannot do this level of inner work alone. It's not because you're weak, it's because you have blind spots. If you're human, you have blind spots. We are unable to see all the facets of who we are. You cannot coach yourself all the time through every fear story when you're inside of the story, when you're inside of the circumstance. This is why a container of coaching is so powerful, because a container provides a space, a safe space to slow down, to pause, and to actually notice what's going on. This container gives language for what's happening. As the coach repeats what you are saying, you are able to see it from a different perspective. Accountability also to practice new thoughts rather than the ones that keep replaying in your brain. Coaching gives tools to regulate and to return to your true self, especially if you're in patterns that are sabotaging yourself. And coaching, lastly, is someone who can reflect back, like I said, the truth when fear gets so loud that you can't even see anything else. Trust me, it's not just about talking about your feelings. It's actually leadership formation. It's becoming the kind of person who can lead without losing yourself. So many leaders invest in strategy, the external things, but rarely work on the inner work of investing on the actual person who carries out the strategy. And then they wonder, why can't I sustain the vision? I know this to be true because I was one of those leaders. And if you're going to carry something meaningful, you need a place where you're going to be able to be challenged and held accountable to the person that you want to become, the person who will carry out that vision. So find someone who can help you do that. Find a safe space to do the inner work. As we close today, I just want to give you some practical things when uncertainty hits, because I guarantee you, if you're a leader, uncertainty will hit at some point. The first is pause. Write down the thought that your brain is telling you. What am I telling myself about what is actually happening? And then return to safety. Just take 60 seconds. A long inhale and exhale, and reframe with a truer thought. Let's close with a couple reflection questions that you can sit with this week. The first is, what story do I tend to tell myself when I don't have clarity? What emotion bubbles up with that story that's being created in me? And does that emotion lead to an aligned action, or does it lead to panic and paralysis? That is often a true sign of whether this is your true self or your false self. What would it look like to trust God in the unseen work and just sit in the uncertainty rather than try to get rid of it? And lastly, who do I need in my life to help me stay honest, present, and grounded with the person that is being formed within me? Remember, the vision that God has placed in you that is being formed isn't just about what you're building. It's actually about the person who is becoming and who will be carrying out that vision. And the leaders who last, the leaders who carry the vision with integrity, are the leaders who do the inner work, not just the outer work that everybody else sees. Until next time, lead like you. If you've been sensing you're ready for the next step, more clarity, more living and leading with peace and freedom, then start here. Download your free Authentic Leadership Starter Bundle at AuthenticLeadershipCollective.com, including 10 traps that keep leaders stuck, an 8-minute morning meditation to reconnect with God, plus practical tools to realign with your true self. And if you want support turning this into real lived change so you can live and lead like you, book a free call with me so you can begin today living and leading authentically.